Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros MLB. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia. With me, as always, is the Welsh. And it's you hanging out there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, ring the bell till it goes ding, and join us for amazing content here on the Fantasy Baseball side of Fantasy Pros. And today, it's the Outfield Guide. Not just any Outfield Guide, the ultimate Outfield Guide. And we're going to get you ready for your drafts. We're going to go through our sleepers, our busts. We're going to talk about the must-haves and also do a little breakdown in between of the tiers here and the ranks, get you some of our favorite players and some of our approaches. And before we do all that, if you're looking for the ultimate cheat code for your draft, then that ultimate cheat code is Draft Wizard. Make sure that you are dominating all your friends and relatives and everybody you know to show them you're the smartest person in the room by using Draft Wizard. You could simulate mock drafts. You could do 100 of them in an hour if you're fast enough. You can undo picks, redo picks. You can use every single tool in the basket of Draft Wizard to make you better at drafting your teams. And when you sync your leagues for free, you can use the Draft Wizard, sync it up to your league. And guess what? All that help, the expert advice, the player recommendations, the cheat sheets, everything will link up for you. So if you're ready to win, head over to fantasypros.com/MLB Draft Wizard or download MLB Draft Wizard app today, wherever you get your apps, and start drafting smarter. All right, Welsh, let's kick things off here with the top tier of outfield, and we'll talk about these guys. Obviously, the top is pretty good. Aaron Judge at the top at 1 in the consensus ADP at fantasypros.com that you can find. Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, Mookie Betts, Corbin Carroll, Fernando Tatis, Julio Rodriguez at 7. I would still put Alvarez ahead of Julio. Julio's been very disappointing to me last year. Then we have Jackson Chourio at 9. Jarren Duran, our favorite son. Look at him, a top 10 outfielder. We're so proud. Mom and Dad are so proud of you, Jarren. Ronald Acuna at 11, who could miss the first month of the season. Then Jazz Chisholm at 12. Certainly a pretty strong grouping there of names. Is there one to you that stands out that maybe doesn't belong?
Ooh, that doesn't belong in there. Oh man, I think they all belong-ish in there. Ronald, okay, but here's my thing. Down here, Carroll and Julio, I think, still have some questions about how things kind of tanked last year and what their production is, and the high cost. You get no discount. You practically get no discount on Carroll. A little bit on Julio. Acuna really scares me. That's the one that scares me the most, only because we are kind of in the dark a little bit about what his timeline is going to be. You know, he was going into the late 20s in early, in November, December NFBC drafts. He's ticking back up as usual because people are seeing his name, but they're talking about that he could miss April. Maybe he could miss May. We need a clear timeline. Right now, I just don't think you can really throw him into that first round. Maybe even top 12 is a little bit questionable based on that. But if we get a positive timeline, he'll become the biggest deal out of all of them. And the only other one that just kind of gets at me, I get some credit for how much I was on Jackson Merrill over the last couple of years and how he blew up last year. But even I am a little bit tenuous, though the hitting profile is so great across the board. It is a massive cost this year. I am not as sold on some of the power numbers. Projections are, and that's kind of the give and take you're going to have. He's not even projected to be a 2020 guy, and he's going inside of the top almost 10 of outfield. So I think there's a little bit of question there. Acuna is probably the biggest one with the injuries, but this is the core of 12 makes sense why they're all here.
I got to say, after this grouping of the first 12 to 15, it gets a little dicey out there. So if you're in those 5 active outfielder leagues, buckle up because this is going to be important. And you're going to need some sleepers there. Haha, look at that transition. Complete professional. Luis Robert is the first one for me. I'm going to list all 3 of mine. I'm going to talk about him. Brandon Nimmo is my second, and Jurickson Profar is my third. Look, with Luis Robert, this is a guy just heading into last year was in that top tier conversation. So I know the White Sox are horrible. I get it. We saw it on paper last year. It doesn't look like it's going to get much better this year at all. And I don't think Luis Robert is going to be there much longer. I think they are dead set on moving him and continuing this youth move. And I'm sure he wants to get out of Dodge as well. But it's not that long ago that Luis Robert was one of these guys that we all coveted in fantasy baseball that we thought, oh my God, this is a guy that I can anchor my offense around. And he has shown you that. He's also just turning 27 years old, so he hasn't even begun to hit his prime. He's only 1 year removed from a 38 homer season. So before we start getting out of the business of Luis Robert, a 30-20 guy, let's have a little bit more patience for him, because where he's going currently at the 25th outfielder overall, I get it, lineup protection is bad, all the stuff around is bad. I still think it's too much of a suppression. It's far too much of a discount. Next guy on my list is Brandon Nimmo. Now, Brandon Nimmo is a guy that's shown you he can get on base in the past. He has shown you that he has got some power. Now, I know the stolen bases have varied a little bit here and the batting average at times as well, but having Juan Soto in this lineup is a game changer. I'm sorry, it just is. Everything in the trickle-down effect there, and as we're recording this, we're still waiting to see if Pete Alonso comes back or not, but if he doesn't come back and Brandon Nimmo gets hurdled up into that number 4 spot behind Mark Vientos, it could be a very big year for Brandon Nimmo, another guy that I think is being grossly undervalued when you're going through these ranks currently. And Nimmo is a player that I think is very steady. You know what you're getting. The lineup is going to be very productive. So to me, Nimmo is another guy that I want in on in 2025. And the last one is a guy that we talked about in our undervalued show is Jurickson Profar, who signed with the Atlanta Braves. This was a player that was once upon a time the number 1 prospect in baseball. And it was a long and winding road. And last year, something I think finally clicked with him. You saw the power spike. You saw the bat to ball skills spike. You saw everything you were looking for. And maybe it's just a late bloomer, or maybe it's just somebody finally getting the best out of him from a coaching standpoint. But whatever it is, when the Atlanta Braves identify you and want you as a piece going forward, guess what? That's something that perks my ears up. That's something that moves you up my draft board. And I think there's a chance you could see him towards the top of this order potentially, how things break out. I am not a Michael Harris guy. So instead, I'd rather hedge my bets later with another Atlanta outfielder and take Jurickson Profar instead. So for me, my 3 biggest sleepers there, all guys that have been around too. It's not like any of these young guys I'm picking. I'm not trying to be all dynasty-ish here today on the show. I want guys that I know can get out there and get it and have proven it before. So give me Luis Robert, give me Brandon Nimmo, and give me Jurickson Profar. Welsh, give me 3 sleepers you're looking for in the outfield in 2025.
Yeah, and just add in, I think there's this line, and it's a line that we don't even care to like go through, but there's this line between undervalued and sleeper. They're kind of siblings of each other. Like Luis Robert would have been 100% on my list, but is he really a sleeper? Is he more undervalued? Either way, if you hadn't put him on here, he's my number 1, because if you listen to the Infield Guide show, I talked about how last season, Bo Bichette's outlier, it was so extreme that it felt like the badness was his outlier. Same thing with Robert. I think last year, the explosiveness of how bad everything was, I'm hanging out with him here in Complex League. I think that's such the outlier, and his batting average dipped and he was still hitting homers and stealing bases, that it works really well. And there have been rumor after rumor that he might be a Cincinnati Red. And if he goes to the Reds in that ballpark, get the hell out of here,
Welsh, man. I hope so, because that makes a ton of sense for the Reds to bring in like a true middle of the order kind of like that dude. Elliot de la Cruz is going to grow in. He might even be that dude already, but to have somebody like Robert in that lineup would be a game changer. And they've got the prospects to do it. They've got a glut already. They had to move India already. And, Nimmo, going back and looking at his previous season, he was another one of these guys where the rule changes of stolen bases really benefited him, right? He went from a guy who stole like 3 to 5 bases to 15. That's like tripling his output there. I know the batting average dropped from the like very steady Eddie 270s to the 220s, but I think if we could bounce back with the batting average, even at the 260, give me the 15 steals, give me the 20 something home runs. Like, I'm looking at Nimmo and I'm looking at Robert. I'm saying to myself, those are guys who can give me, potentially 5 categories, and yet they're being grossly undervalued. Profar's going at the 166th player overall, and Brandon Nimmo, looking for him too on this list here. He's
around 160.
He's around the 160 range too. So, I mean, look, you've got opportunity here with all 3 of those guys to give you a bunch of productivity. And to me, all of them are being far, far underdrafted.
2 of those 3 I very, very much agree with, and we'll talk about that. 1 I do not, but we'll see if Robert does go to the Reds. They did sign Austin Hayes because they couldn't come to a deal, but I love the Robert one, sleeper, undervalued, whatever you want to call it. My picks for this one, I am going to go a little dynasty and rookie. One of my favorite sleepers, if you will, is Dylan Cruz for this year. Dylan Cruz with the Nationals still qualifies as a rookie, so him and Matt Shaw are going to be the top 2 for outside of not named Roki Sasaki for the NL Rookie of the Year battle, because he still qualifies. Last year, he only hit 218 with 3 homers in his debut, but he stole 12 bases in like 120 games. Why do I like all of this? The potential that he's going to lead off for this team. As a rookie, he had an under 20% strikeout rate, phenomenal 8% walk rate. They legitimately have to consider, and that is where he was batting when he came up. If he's the leadoff hitter, we're talking about the potential of 80 to 100 runs, somewhere in there. It really depends on what this team ends up looking like. He was aggressive on the base paths. He also is more, I don't want to call him like the Mookie Gunner, but you know how there's leadoff hitters that are just like little table setters. There's not much power, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And then there are these guys that go in and they're like number
Right.
three hitters. That is who Cruz is going to be. Cruz is a guy, he had a 6% barrel rate in his rookie year, 44% hard hit rate. He's a guy that can crush a handful of leadoff homers. So I really like Dylan Cruz. He's one of my favorite sleepers. He's outside the top 100 on the overall. Two other outfielders I'm going to throw in here just to get their names out. Jake McCarthy and Jordan Walker. Jake McCarthy is also being undervalued. I want to say he might be outside the top 50 outfielders being taken. NFBC, he's the 55th outfielder going. But if you want to go and compare and you care about projections, ATC projections have him as almost a 10-30 guy. 8 homers, 29 stolen bases with a 262 average in 135 games. Why is that important? He's completely changed his profile. He doesn't strike out. He doesn't have this big monster hitting profile, but he's those guys. He gets the ball in the air, and he is an aggressive base runner, which the Diamondbacks love to do. So if that batting average is in play and he beats that 135 games at all, you're talking about 10-30 as the 55th outfielder outside the top 200. Sleeper, baby, especially when you're chasing some of those stolen bases. And one of my absolute favorite deep ones is Jordan Walker. Jordan Walker has not gotten that big fair shake. Things fell apart last year. Mason Wynn has talked about in the offseason how Walker has been completely kind of revamping the swing. Walker has this really great interview out there as well, working with hitting coaches about how they identified that his hands were too far out and he wasn't able to get into that explosion place. So they are moving his hands in as he has one of the fastest bats in baseball. He barrels the ball. He hits it really hard. He's hit for average. He also now doesn't have to worry about being sent down to the minors and losing that spot. They're committed to him all season long. So you have a significant swing change in play for a guy that hits the ball really hard, has a big, fast swing. I think we're in a post-hype world of Jordan Walker. He's a nobody for people in drafting. I'm talking about Jake McCarthy. I'm trying to scroll down here. Jordan Walker, let me see if I can find it.
Well,
Jordan
while
Walker
you're scrolling,
70th outfielder. 70th outfielder, rest outside the 300.
I think it's amazing that we got to this point in life because you were always one of the toughest guys on Jake McCarthy. You were a very anti-Jake McCarthy guy over the years of all the thousands of shows we've done together. So when Welsh is saying, hey, it's time on Jake McCarthy, you better listen. And then Jordan Walker, I mean, the guy's just 23 years old. He has an elite level profile. Look at the minor league slash here, 291, 368, 487. That's big time stuff. And he's just 23. I think you're 100% right too. And you said it. When you are putting that much pressure on a guy like, he's not a third baseman. You're going to move him here. You're going to move him there. You're going to, he's a young kid. The confidence gets shaken. We're going to drop you down to the minor leagues, call you back up. Leave him alone. Let him just figure it out for a season. St. Louis has got a lot to figure out anyway. So I'm with you 1,000% on Jordan Walker. And you're right. He is free. In fact, this is the time too in dynasty leagues, I'd be buying on him because he's just 23 years old. And because now the value is at its absolute lowest and it's nothing but upside here. So Jordan Walker, I like him in redraft like you. And in dynasty, I think that's a big one too. Let's get through the next tier of outfielders here. 13 through 24. You have Jackson Merrill at 13, who Welsh mentioned earlier, then Wyatt Langford. Some teases there with Langford. We're both very high on him. O'Neill Cruz at 15. That's one of Welsh's favorite guys. Michael Harris, one of my least favorite guys. I like Michael Harris. He's a good baseball player.
You don't.
He's just not that exciting to me in fantasy. I think he's overrated. I think he's like Jason Hayward-ish. Just saying. James Wood. That's a guy I like at 17. Brent Rooker at 18, I absolutely love, especially getting out of that ballpark too. You could have 50 home runs maybe in Sacramento. Kyle Schwarber at 19, you know what it is. That's a Schwarber Fest in June. And outside of that, well, we'll figure it out. Teoscar Hernandez at 20, Marcelo Ozuna at 21, Anthony Santander at 22, now a Toronto Blue Jay. Brenton Doyle, a great, one of the waiver wire pickups of the year, I think last year, Brenton Doyle. And then Lawrence Butler, you could put in that category as well. A red hot summer for Lawrence Butler. In this second tier of Welsh, who are you most excited about drafting?
Well, it kind of gives away a little bit. I'll say the two guys that are my absolute favorites, and I'm going to talk about, I think, at least one of them later, James Wood and Wyatt Langford. Those two. Kind of cheaty, I guess, because they're a little bit higher, but they're going both around there. I think they're next to each other in most ADPs and ranks around like the 40 to 50 range. I have to personally walk out of a draft with one of those two guys. That is so, I know we're going to do must-haves in a little bit. I have to get one of those two guys. Those two are my absolute favorites. I will tell you, in this tier is one of my least favorite and my busts that we're going to talk about. But Wyatt Langford and James Wood, two of my absolute favorites.
What an incredible tease. In this tier is also one of my busts. How about that?
I wonder who it is.
Who could it be? But before I even get into that, I just want to say, besides, I'm excited about those two guys as well. James Wood, I'm incredibly excited about this year. And I think Brenton Doyle, I'm very excited about also. The more I continue to peel into the profile of him, I'm just excited. I love the fact he plays in Colorado, of course. He got power, he got speed. I just look at him and say, I don't think it was a fluke from what I've seen. Now, look, if we Nolan Jones, you could look at last year and say, the things didn't go very well for him. I don't think Brenton Doyle is going to have that same sort of problem necessarily there. So let's move on to some of those busts. So why don't you go first this time, Welsh? Because I went first last.
Yeah, you're going to love this. After everything you just said, let's transition into my biggest bust. Brenton Doyle is my least favorite of those guys. The three guys I have on this list, this is where I guess you and I just are kind of in a disagreement standpoint, because not only do I have Brenton Doyle, I've also got Brandon Nimmo in here, and I've got Spencer Steer, and there's pretty, I think, clear answers on those other two. But starting with Brenton Doyle, you're not wrong. Like 23 homers, 30 stolen bases. That's paired off of a 10 homer, 22 stolen base season in 2023 where he stunk. Like, he stunk from a batting average standpoint. He hit 203. That's where some of my worries come from. He hit 260 this past year. Expected batting average kind of supports. Barreled a little bit more. He did dip his strikeouts down. He struck out 35% of the time the year prior. That came down to 25% this past year. But I guess my problem is with him, the cost is very high. He's going around like top 75. Maybe he jumps down a little bit. But I feel like if Lawrence Butler goes, people are like, I've got to get Brenton Doyle because, boom, this is a 20-30 guy. But I think there are some things to be concerned about. He struggled in the second half of the year. He hit 276 in the first half, 234 in the second half. Strikeouts were coming back up. Plus, he has massive home road splits. That's always something to pay attention to with Colorado guys. The positive point is he does get to hit in Colorado, so don't take that away. But he hit over 300 in Colorado this past year, only 211 on the road. That is that is the quintessential horrific split for a Colorado player. I will say he did still hit double-digit homers and steal double-digit bases on the road. I'm just a little bit worried that you have kind of extremes, a year where he hit 203, then he jumps up to 260, expected batting average is down, huge home road splits. I don't love the cost on it, and I think he's going to come back down to earth a little bit, so he's kind of a bust. Steer and Nimmo, they kind of speak to the same general space. Spencer Steer, me picking on these Reds guys, I guess, had great counting stats. Horrific
Reds. Hashtag.
Yeah, it's horrific batting profile. The average was stinky, and I'm not sure that it's going to bounce back. Plus, I know they have this foreseeable commitment to him, but they have just got all of these players where I'm not sure. Steer is positive because he can move around to different spots and he might not ever get really platoon, but there's a potential for that. Plus the batting average was coming down. And I think he sinks you in that territory. And frankly, there's other 2020 guys that are going cheaper that have bad batting averages that you can bet on. So I'm just not really here for like the Steer and Matt McClain costs with that batting average. And, you spoke to Nimmo. Listen, you're not necessarily wrong, but the thing that was great about Nimmo was that really high batting average. And that kind of went away. He doesn't really have massive counting stats that are added to it. So it's like, if you're not giving me the high batting average, I think that's taking away a bit some of those counting stats that are already a little bit muted. And his cost isn't exactly cheap. So 224 this past season. He only had a 244 expected batting average. Some of the profile is still there on the hard hit and barrel, and maybe that's going to bounce back. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure we get to that 20 and 15. I could just eat my words on these, and I kind of picked on all players that had really bad batting averages, and that might be me bouncing back, wanting to focus on batting average more this year. I'm just not sold specifically on Steer and Nimmo that the batting average comes back and that makes up for a lot of that stuff. And Brenton Doyle, again, I might just eat my words, but top 100 with that, I'm just not there.
I do agree Doyle's going a little early. I will. Brent Rooker, I'm probably, more. You'll see a lot more Brent Rooker on my rosters than you will Doyle.
Same
because I just the light tower power. I'm just here for it. However, with Brandon Nimmo, just to shoot back there, it's the lowest BABIP of his career by a wide margin, 267. The years before, 327, 317,
Yeah.
366, 326, 293, 351. I mean, like Brandon Nimmo, I think the batting average is going to bounce back. I think, last year you can look and say just things didn't go his way there. But if he's going to maintain these stolen bases, give me 20 home runs, drive in 80 plus runs, which he will. If he's hitting 4, if he's hitting 5, he's hitting 6 in that lineup. I don't care. That lineup is going to be really good this year. I think Nimmo is going to have a much better season than the guy who's number 1 on my list, Michael Harris. I have a comparison. While you were talking, I finally figured out who Michael Harris is. You ready for this?
All right.
Lorenzo Cain. That's who he is.
I loved Lorenzo Cain.
I love him too. He is a lovely human being too. I got to do a show with him once. He is so
really
nice.
I didn't know that.
Football guy. Yeah, I did a show with him once. Awesome
Shout out
dude.
Lorenzo Cain.
Shout out Lorenzo Cain. But statistically, profile wise, Lorenzo Cain was a guy that looked like he should have been hitting 25, 30 home runs everywhere, right? Like he looked, that phrase they use in Major League Baseball, he's what they look like. Lorenzo Cain's what they look like, man. That guy is a stud. But from a statistical standpoint, he's a guy that was typically underwhelming. He never hit 20 home runs in a season. His high was 16. He is a guy that did give you some speed, would give you 28 steals, 30 steals. Now, Michael Harris hasn't quite reached that level yet at all. I just want to put that out there as well. He's reached 20 twice. Last year just gave 110 games, so again, the injuries last year a little bit. I'm not saying Michael Harris is a bad player, and at 23 years old, he could continue to grow. What I'm saying is I think he's a little bit more Lorenzo Cain than he is Kyle Tucker. And I feel like the fantasy space looks at him, sees what he quote unquote looks like in terms of it. It looks good doing it. Jason Hayward was another guy too. People forget Jason Hayward took everybody by storm in Atlanta. He was going to be the next great Atlanta Braves superstar until he wasn't. And he was another guy that looked the part. The power never really developed. He had some stolen base, ability, but at the end of the day, he just never realized his full potential. I think that's what Michael Harris is. And I think you can get Michael Harris productivity out of Brandon Nimmo 100 picks later, and I'm just not in for it.
You know what's interesting? I just want to throw one thing in here too. And sure. I'm so glad you did that because I was literally going to compare these two.
I like when we fight about players and argue because I think it's good for everybody out there who is unsure on the fence because we're providing you with the arguments to make your own decisions here.
Well, so another thing I wanted to add on Nimmo, and this totally correlates here. One of the things Nimmo did really well the year prior to this past year was he was an all pitch hitter. And what I mean by that is he's hitting off speed stuff, high batting averages against off speed and breaking pitches. And then he was doing decent against fastball. This past year, all fastball. He had a 13 run value against fastballs. He was hitting almost under 200 against off breaking speed and off speed stuff, or breaking and off speed stuff. So that worries me. If that bounces back, that's good. But the expected numbers didn't tell that story where he can hit off speed and breaking stuff again. So if he's only a fastball hitter, I think that mitigates it. Back to Michael Harris. What's the interesting thing about Michael Harris? Higher batting averages against breaking and off-speed stuff while still being at least a 250 hitter against fastballs. He had more homers against breaking pitches than anything else, and that's been pretty consistent about his career. That's what I do like about Michael Harris. Now, to be fair, if we compare these two players, Nimmo is a dramatically better cost than both of them if the projections are in the same standpoint. They're a little bit different. ATC has Nimmo at 19 homers, 8 stolen bases, and only a 246 average. I think that's blah. But Michael Harris, the projections they're better than probably what you're going to expect, but they're still not does he deserve to be a top 50? The projections are 21, 18 stolen bases with a 279 average. Big boost. And then the final pull together, it's in my face. Brenton Doyle is projected better, 21 homers, 27 stolen bases over all those guys, and I'm busting him with those splits. But the profile, when we're talking about types of hitters, Michael Harris is still an all-pitch type of hitter, where Nimmo really regressed last year, and it's going to be, can he improve that? And also, could Michael Harris be susceptible to that? Because he's also not a loud counting stats type of player.
No, he's not. He's not scoring 100 runs in the Braves lineup.
Doesn't steal 40 bases or anything like that.
Which is frustrating, right? You're playing for the Braves, and I know last year everybody was hurt, but still, even those other previous seasons, and if you're going to hit him at the top of the order, obviously it's going to hurt his RBI potential. So, and if he gets dropped, it's going to hurt the pitches he sees. There's a lot of reasons why Michael Harris to me is a guy that I just do not think is worthy of where he gets drafted.
I like him, but maybe the cost is a little. But I am for him. You're against him.
If you're telling me you could have Luis Robert or Michael Harris, are you kidding me? Sorry.
There's a big batting average difference.
I know, but like a big homers and steals difference and a guy who might hit me 35, 40 home run. I mean, I'm sorry. Like that dude is that good. Luis Robert is a monster.
Yeah.
Another guy on this list too, Pete Crow-Armstrong. Now look, I watched him a ton in the Mets organization. I was never super impressed with his bat. Now, I know they made a trade, sent him to Chicago. Last year, obviously, struggled mightily in the first half of the year, hit just 203 with a 582 OPS. And then the second half was better, right? 7 homers, 262 batting average, a 736 OPS. It's fine, right? But the OBP was still 310. Like, to me, Pete Crow-Armstrong, it's like, I feel like everybody wants him to be, and he's fun. He's exciting. He's a good defensive player. Like, he plays with his hair on fire. I like him as a baseball player. But this is fantasy. This is business. And from a business standpoint, I think the fantasy baseball community wants Pete Crow-Armstrong to be so good that they are talking themselves into him being better than he was last year. And I'm just not buying it. I'm not buying it at ADP. I think it's absurd. I'm out. Jason Domínguez is going at the same ADP. So is Brandon Nimmo and Dylan Cruz. Are you kidding me? I want Dylan Cruz way more than I want Pete Crow-Armstrong. It's absurd right now.
Yeah.
I can't even talk. I get so upset about it. And the last guy, I told you last year he was a bust. I told you he doesn't have the goods. Nobody listened to me. It's Evan Carter. And for those people buying back in, just don't do it. He is not that good. I could tell you by just the first at bat I ever saw, he's okay. He's going to struggle against left-handed pitching. He's going to struggle with this. He's going to struggle with that. I went on rants last year because you remember it was Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford were neck and neck, and some people like Carter better. And all I kept saying was, do your eyes work? Because I don't think they do. Because Wyatt Langford is a dude and Evan Carter is just a guy. And I'm sorry. Like,
I don't know why you hate him so much. He did struggle
last year.
I had pointed out like the lefty stuff was a big major problem, but he was a monster in the minor leagues. I will say this, he's talked about in the offseason, I think it was at Rangers like Fantasy Fest they had, that there was some injury stuff that was lingering, something to monitor. But I did always think the counting stats were a bit overinflated. He is getting to the point where he's kind of free. I agree with you on the Pete Crow stuff. I'm not about Pete Crow. He's around ranges of players. I just, no thanks. I'm not going to do it. I want the other guys. And I'm worried that Pete Crow's counting stats are a bit overinflated. Carter is tough though, because he is so free. And I think there could be an injury thing that plays in there. But the problem is so unimpactful against lefties that maybe he really truly needs to be a splits type of player. But we'll see. I mean, I watched him
on the right side of the
platoon.
So that's the good news. But the bad news, if he's not an everyday player, he's going to hurt you. And I just fear that if he has a good spring, it's going to rocket ship the ADP. And everyone's going to buy back in. And I think it's going to be like the Jordan Walker post hype, Jackson Holiday, love all those dudes. Evan Carter, just not buying it. Let's get through the next grouping of outfielders here. Let's go 25 and on. Luis Robert at 25. Yes, please. Brian Reynolds. This group to me is really valuable. Brian Reynolds, Cody Bellinger on the bounce back in Yankee Stadium, Spencer Steer, Seiya Suzuki, Riley Green, a player we love. Here it is. Mike Trout, 101 overall, 31st outfielder. Christian Yelich, Ian Happ, Randy Rosarena, a perennial 2020 guy, Adolis Garcia, and then Stephen Kwan. So you've got a little bit of everything here, but this is kind of an interesting. I almost feel like this tier is where you want to live a little bit more, where I think it's a little bit safer. I think it's got some upside in it too, and it's cheaper. I love the outfielder 3 group this year. I think they have a little even less volatility than the outfielder 2 group because we just pulled 2 busts each from the outfielder 2 group.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I actually kind of feel like I probably want 2 guys out of that second tier, because like I said, I have a couple guys I'm really adamant about. I do want 1 guy out of this group. The problem is like, it's probably me buying back, like buy back on Robert. I hate to say it, buy back on Trout. Like it's just so late and he's going to DH more. It's probably going to be something outside the top 100. I think he can't.
Well, that's the question, right? I mean, Mike Trout, we got to talk about it. He's at 101 and Yelich is at 107. So
you want to hear? I'll pull projections. You want to hear projections?
Sure. Do you know my answer is to both of those questions?
What?
Riley Green.
I mean, Riley Green. I like Riley Green. Great hitting profile. All right, let's do this. I'm going to give you, or you take a guess on the projections. Take a guess on the games played for ATC. We're going to use Ariel Jones ATC. Yeah, for Mike Trout. First, we'll do the games.
If it's over 101, it can't be right.
111. ATC, number 1 accuracy projections. So now that you know 111 games, what do you think the batting average is at? We'll start there. Not that the games matter for that.
264.
A little bit lower, actually, 256. Now, what do you
Okay.
think the homers are? 111 games at 256. Home runs.
I'm going to say 24.
Very close. 28, though. 28 homers. Ron
Okay.
Washington is there. They do like to run. He won't be in the outfield. What do you think the stolen bases are? What do you think the stolen bases are? 7. And then around 70 runs, 70 RBI. You know, that's
I'll take the
about
under
it.
on the Mike Trout steals on the air, please.
I think that, well, he was stealing before he got hurt. I think he stole 10 bases or something before he ended up getting hurt. I'm here for Mike Trout at the cost because now you're not stomaching. You're getting him at outfielder 3 or 4. You can see a bottom line projection. He is going to DH some more. I know this was a Byron Buxton argument last year and stuff like that.
Say, when do we start? When do we start? I mean, every year it's like a new low where we set ourselves up for failure when it comes to Mike Trout. Went from 1 overall to the turn, or from the turn to the 50. And Pianowski was on last year and he was crushing it on that.
I was just about to say, like the Pianowski thing. By the way, 6 stolen bases. I was right before Trout got hurt. I was like, he's a deal, blah, blah, blah. And then Pianowski was 100% right in my face. It was the injury. He got hurt. My only argument, again, is Trout was looking like his batting average did.
So who's a better return on investment at this stage of their career, Byron Buxton or Mike Trout?
I think Trout.
Still, I'm still got to pay top 100 for him, not Byron Buxton.
No, it's outside the top 100 for Trout. Trout is
101.
Trout and NFBC here. Okay, NFBC drafts the 30th outfielder 127. That does boost up catchers and stuff.
And you know what though, regardless of the boosting of the catchers, when that tells you that the quote unquote experts, like the people who are playing the big money leagues, they don't see it the same as the casuals. The casuals are still buying in, and everybody else is like, I'm not ready for the top 100, 125. That's, I think, more telling. That end.
I think he's depressed a little bit because closers and catchers come up. That might speak to it. It's probably still about at cost. 30th outfielder. My argument, listen, you know what you're getting in for. If you draft Mike Trout, he might play 40 games and then he's out for the season again and it's done. But if he is DHing and he comes past this, you're potentially looking at 30 homers, 10 stolen bases, and it's Mike Trout. Like, listen, it could be a problem. It's more inherent risk. It's more inherent risk. I get it.
He needs a change of venue. I mean, I wish the Phillies or somebody would make a move. I don't know. I mean, that Mike Trout contract doesn't seem so absurd now compared to what's going on. I mean, that's the problem is like, you're going to have the Angels probably have to eat some of it, but
yeah, but what was the Angels going to have? Anthony Rendon's going to be the face of that organization. You got to have somebody. That's why they're never going to get rid of Trout. They already lost Ohtani. Trout's there. He's stuck. Quicksand.
Again, looking through the rest of this ADP here after Quan, Dominguez, Crow-Armstrong, Nimmo, these are like the debatable guys, right? Dylan Cruz. I feel like this is the love or hate group. Nick Castellanos, Cowser, Josh Lowe, Jurickson Profar, who are on lists as well. Tyler O'Neill, Lane Thomas, Rafaela, Ward, Carpenter, and Tolia there, and then Burleson at 51. So the top 50 outfielders, I mean, once you hit, again, those 5 active outfielder leagues, you have to be aggressive on outfield, which means you have to have your must-haves, which means we have made our list of must-haves. And before we get to them, just a quick reminder to put these names on the cheat sheets and create your own cheat sheet with the Cheat Sheet Creator to enhance your fantasy baseball strategies. With the Cheat Sheet Creator, just integrate and merge rankings from multiple experts. Choose your experts, the ones you like, not the ones you don't, the ones you respect. Clearly not me. Organize players into tiers of personalized notes and streamline your decision-making process and automatically update your cheat sheet with the latest expert consensus rankings. That way you are prepared for all of your drafts. Use the Cheat Sheet Creator over at fantasypros.com/cheat sheet or on the Fantasy Baseball Draft Wizard app. My must-haves. Welsh is getting a little antsy about his own guy, so I'm going to have to pump him back up. Jackson Merrill. What more do you need to see of Jackson Merrill? He was terrific last year. I want Jackson Merrill. I wasn't picking anybody in the top 10, but he is right outside of that grouping. And I feel like, hey, if you hit the infield early, and I believe he was on the roster I just drafted, right? Where I think it was Jose Ramirez and Freeman, and then I hit Jackson Merrill up there. I was like, look, you know what? I still think he's in that upper echelon of outfielders. Gives you power, gives you speed, a good lineup around him. I like it. James Wood, I'm ready for this. My body is ready for the James Wood experience in 2025. We got a little taste of it last year. And James Wood has superstar written all over him. I think, the Nationals are such a good organization over the years of identifying young talent. Keeping them has been the problem for the Washington Nationals over the years. But from a scouting standpoint, like this team knows, whether it's via trade or knows via draft what they're trying to get. And they are just always this pipeline of really talented young players. And I didn't think the big stage was too big for James Wood last year. In 79 games, so roughly half a season, 9 homers, 14 steals, 264 batting average. The sky's the limit for this dude. I just think he's going to be absolutely fantastic this year. And if you look at the minor league / 302, 402, 539, that's elite, my friends. That is elite. And lastly, Brent Rooker. I don't think 45, 50 home runs is out of the question for him. Oakland is the worst. It's the worst place. It's the worst ballpark it always was. And now,
Oakland. I thought you were saying, are you calling them the Oakland A's? I was like,
no. Oakland is and was the worst. And now you're getting into that little spring training ballpark. And I'm fascinated to see. It's a little bit of, the minor league ballpark factor here of Sacramento. I'm fascinated to see what it plays like. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it won't be as good for him, but Brent Rooker was kind of a guy who came out of nowhere a couple years ago. People weren't buying back in. Now, after a couple seasons, I don't know how you don't look at this guy as one of the elite power hitters. And it's funny because like Kyle Schwarber is going in that similar range to him. And it's not even close for me. I'll take Brent Rooker every single time over Schwarber. Schwarber has way too many deficits. So those are my must-haves: Jackson Merrill, James Wood, and Brent Rooker. Welsh, who are your must-haves for 2025 in the outfield?
Yeah, and just to throw, I love Brent Rooker. You got a couple guys on this list. I'm not anti Jackson Merrill for sure. I just didn't love the cost.
This was your dude. This was your pick. You made money on Rookie of the Year.
I would still take him. I just wanted a little bit of a discount. I love James Wood. Rooker, just to throw in that ballpark again, it is 5 feet shorter in left field. So that is going to go for right-handed hitters. So that works for Rooker. For the most part, most of the other the parameters are close to Oakland Coliseum. But
yeah, but the climate's different.
But then Sacramento's going to be hotter. It's going to be probably closer to like climate. Arizona. Yeah, you're not coastal.
When you're by the bay and you get those weird gusts and things like that, sometimes it's not positive. It's like old Candlestick Park. Remember old Candlestick Park used to kill home run sometimes.
Yeah. I guess like I wouldn't think of it like, oh my God, this is this crazy minor league park, but there are benefits and there are benefits that are going to help him. Mm-hmm. And the batting average is good. The homers are good. Like he's a total no brainer. The guys that I'm going to throw on my list, you took James Wood. So I already mentioned before, Wyatt Langford is the other one that I want to have. Langford, 253 average, 16 homers, 19 stolen bases after really struggling through the year. Like he really had some early struggles and really popped at the end of the year. He finished the second half of the season with 11 homers and 11 stolen bases. And so think about that again, 16 homers, 19 stolen bases. He really came in on the second half of the year. There's really good contact skills, almost a 10% barrel, 43% hard hit rate, doesn't strike out. Expected batting average is actually a little bit higher than he hit. And now you're probably going to hit 3 in front of Corey Seager, Marcus Semien. You got, again, Adolis, Jake Berger, Josh Young behind you. There's run opportunities. He's 5-tool. I just got to have him. If it's not James Wood, I think Wyatt Langford actually might be a little bit safer on the batting average front as well. And that's something I'm trying to get. So really love Wyatt Langford. The other two, Jasson Dominguez, and you had mentioned him, Jurickson Profar. And this is kind of balancing the different type of players I might want to have. If I drafted an outfielder early on, let's just say I got Corbin Carroll. Shocker. And then I take like Wyatt Langford as my outfielder 2. I don't mind as an outfielder 3-4, Jasson Dominguez, because he's going in really low. I think he's a Rookie of the Year candidate. You're already looking at projections that are putting him near a 2020 guy, but in a low amount of games. He's got left field locked up. It's a great hitter environment. He's super aggressive on the base paths. And I think you're going to see him bounce back as far as the hit tool goes. He's just being kind of depressed because there's so much prospect fatigue. I want him. I will say I'm presenting some conditional things. I talked about Mike Trout. He's a little conditional. You don't want to take him with a bunch of injury guys. Listen, you don't probably want to take Wyatt Langford, James Wood, and Jasson Dominguez. You don't want to take all these rookies.
No, unless it's a dynasty keeper situation.
Yeah, I think Langford provides a floor that makes me feel comfortable being able to take a rookie, but I wouldn't want to take Dominguez and Dylan Cruz.
I like James Wood's floor more than Wyatt Langford. I know that might sound crazy to you because you have a full season from Wyatt Langford. I just think James Wood is the truth, man. Like I watch that kid play, and I see nothing but like superstar every time.
I know it's funny. I was actually at his pro debut. Him and Jackson Merrill, they're best friends. They came out together. They walked out. I've got a ball actually with both of them. They signed it together of James Wood and Jackson Merrill because he was a Padre, and I've been watching James forever, and I was pretty down on James Wood. But the thing, he's made so many great changes. He hits righties and lefties now, hits the ball super hard, kind of reorganized his swing. Felt like he kind of played down sometimes. He struggled when he played in rookie ball, but like those two are best friends. So you also got these guys like talking to each other, really great contact hitters. I don't know if I disagree with you. I think the counting tools are just way potentially higher for James Wood. But again, like I don't know what the mixture is. So be careful when I say these are must-haves. And when I say Jason Domínguez, because like I said, I wouldn't want, I drafted Christian Campbell and Dylan Cruz and all those, but he's one of those guys I think you should play for upside. And then not to get into any more of it, but I love the Jurickson Profar. I love the lineup. The lineup protection, the run potential, the ballpark. He's become a 24-10 guy. He's kind of depressed in value because people don't care about him. I just think he is a quintessential outfielder 5, if you can do it. Now, some people can't have that investment as high, but I think he's going around like 160. Outfielder 4 or 5. If you can get him as a 5, I think he is just like the prototypical 5. Even if he's an outfielder 4 in like a 15 team, I think you're in a really good spot for your 2010 with a really good batting average. Those are my must-haves.
Profar versus Michael Harris, category for category. I want to take that bet. I'll take Profar. All I got to do is win 3 of the 5 categories. I take it.
That's tough because if Michael Harris goes back to the bottom of the order, Profar might take RBIs. He could take average and he could take homers, but that is pretty close. That's pretty close.
Yeah,
value
not an ADP. Not an ADP either.
No, 100%.
So what do you guys think about Mike Trout? Are you drafting him this year? What do you think? Who are your must-haves?
No
who are your I think they are. 100 is very tempting. Who are your must-haves? Who's your sleepers? Who's your bust? Drop them in the comments below on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Fantasy Pros MLB. And, of course, don't forget to ring the bell for notifications so you never miss a second of content here. We are your home for all things fantasy baseball. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For the Welsh, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.